In February 2025, Queensland police raided 12 properties in a coordinated operation. What they found was alarming. The Comanchero outlaw motorcycle gang was building a new street crew. Officers seized 1 kilogram of cocaine, 2 firearms, and a cannabis grow house. 15 people were charged. This was the latest chapter in the violent evolution of a gang whose origins trace back to a John Wayne film and which became infamous for Australia's deadliest biker massacre. The Comanchero Motorcycle Club didn't originate in Australia. It began in Scotland. In 1968, Scottish immigrant William George Ross arrived in Sydney after serving 7 years in the British Army's Royal Engineers. Inspired by the 1961 John Wayne movie, The Comancheros, Ross chose that name for his new motorcycle club. Ross was not a typical biker. A military enthusiast, he ran the club like a regimented army unit. Members performed weekly paramilitary drills, and Ross created an elite group called the Strike Force. On the clubhouse wall, a sign read, "If it's white, sniff it. If it's female or it moves, sleep with it. If it narcs, kill it." Ross called himself the Supreme Commander. His strict military leadership style caused internal tensions. One former member remarked, "If I wanted to march around in the backyard, I would have joined the army." Despite the discontent, Ross's methods would lead to one of the most infamous biker conflicts in Australian history. In 1983, Anthony Mark Spencer broke away from Ross's chapter and formed a second Comanchero chapter in Sydney. He defied Ross's authority, dividing the club. During a visit to the United States, Spencer met members of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club in Texas. The Bandidos wanted access to P2P, a chemical used to make amphetamines that was legal in Australia, but banned in the US. In exchange, they offered alliance and brotherhood. By November 1983, Spencer's group had officially patched over to become the first Bandidos chapter in Australia. From that point on, the two clubs became bitter enemies. On September 2, 1984, Father's Day in Australia, a British motorcycle club organized a swap meet at the Viking Tavern in Milpera, a suburb of Sydney. Ross gathered his Comancheros and instructed them to go armed. "Okay, men, let's move out," he ordered. 19 armed Comancheros arrived around 1 p.m. and took hidden positions. Ross planned a pincer movement inspired by military tactics from the Anglo-Zulu War. But when he got distracted by members of another club inside the tavern, some Comancheros followed him in. At 1:20 p.m., 34 Bandidos arrived. Weapons were distributed. An argument broke out, followed by gunfire. The shootout lasted just 10 minutes. When it was over, 7 people were dead: 4 Comancheros, 2 Bandidos, and 14-year-old Leanne Walters, an innocent bystander. 28 others were injured. The trial that followed became one of the largest in Australian history. More than 1,000 potential jurors were screened before 12 were selected. The case lasted over 2 years. Justice Adrian Roden identified Ross as the main instigator. He received a life sentence along with 4 other Comancheros convicted of murder. 16 Bandidos were sentenced to 7 years for manslaughter. The massacre led to major reforms in Australian gun laws. The New South Wales Firearms Act was amended to require legitimate reasons for carrying firearms in public. Ross served only 5 years and 3 months before being released. He retired on the Central Coast near Mangrove Mountain. By the early 2000s, however, a new generation had seized control of the Comancheros. One of them was Mahmoud Mick Howie, who arrived in Australia from Lebanon in 1985 as a refugee. He joined the club in 1999 at just 19 years old. Tall and imposing, Howie quickly rose through the ranks. In 2002, he led a group of younger members, mostly from Middle Eastern and Pacific Islander backgrounds, to Ross's home. They beat the aging founder, stripped him of his colors, and stole his Harley-Davidson. By 2003, Howie declared himself national president and supreme commander of the Comancheros. Under his leadership, the gang expanded its drug trafficking operations and became more violent. The old members resented the new generation, and the new generation had no respect for tradition. On March 22, 2009, the rivalry between the Comancheros and the Hells Angels erupted into public violence at Sydney Airport's Terminal 3. Howie and Hells Angels national president Derek Wayne boarded the same flight from Melbourne to Sydney. During the flight, they exchanged threats and called their members to meet them at the airport armed. When the plane landed at 1:30 p.m., both groups were waiting. Comancheros with knives and knuckle dusters, Hells Angels ready to fight. At Gate 5, the two sides clashed. 12 Comancheros fought 5 Hells Angels. Witnesses heard someone shout, "He's got a nug," biker slang for a gun spelled backward.
A violent brawl erupted in front of horrified passengers. Witness Naomi Constantine told the ABC they started grabbing the metal poles that divide the check-in area and swinging them like swords at each other's heads. During the chaos, 29-year-old Anthony Zervas, brother of Hells Angels Sergeant-at-Arms Peter Zervas, was beaten with a 17-kilogram metal bollard and stabbed multiple times. He was not even a Hells Angels member, just associated through his brother. Security footage showed Comancheros repeatedly striking and kicking Zervas as he lay motionless on the ground. The fight lasted just 30 seconds, but by the time it ended, Zervas was dead. His brother cried out, "Hang on, Tone!" Over 50 witnesses, including passengers and airport staff, saw the attack unfold. Security guards were unarmed and unable to intervene. Australian federal police arrived too late. Mahmoud Mick Howie had already left the scene, reportedly telling Peter Zervas, "You're dead. You're going to have bullet holes through you." 6 Comancheros were arrested and convicted of rioting and affray. In November 2011, Howie was found guilty of murder. Justice Robert Allen Hume stated that although Howie may not have personally delivered the fatal blows, his presence clearly authorized and encouraged the actions of those who beat Anthony Zervas to death. In May 2014, Howie's murder conviction was overturned on appeal, and a retrial was ordered. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter and received a minimum sentence of 3.5 years in prison. But Howie's story did not end there. In February 2018, while sitting in his Mercedes SUV outside a gym in Rockdale, New South Wales, he was shot dead at age 37. The killing remains unsolved. Between 2022 and 2023, the Comancheros descended into turmoil. In April 2022, Melbourne chapter president Mick Murray was arrested for first-degree murder. A month later, National Sergeant-at-Arms Tariq Zahed was seriously wounded in an assassination attempt. In August 2022, senior member Mark Buttle was extradited from Turkey to Australia on drug trafficking charges. That same month, Zahed himself was charged with murder. In January 2023, Duax Ngakuru was arrested in Turkey on narcotics smuggling charges, and in October 2023, Turkish police detained 37 full-patch Comanchero members in Istanbul. The gang was no longer confined to Australia. It had expanded across Southeast Asia and New Zealand. Since 2015, more than 3,000 people have been deported from Australia to New Zealand under Section 501, grounds of bad character. Many of them were Comanchero members. One of them, former Sergeant-at-Arms Sasilika Naufahu, was deported in 2016. He went on to establish and lead the Comanchero's New Zealand chapter. In 2019, police raids seized more than $3.7 million in assets from the New Zealand branch. In September 2024, New Zealand police charged 41 Comanchero members and associates with 137 offenses following a 3-year investigation. Officers confiscated 206 kilograms of methamphetamine, 1.76 kilograms of cocaine, 2.6 kilograms of cannabis, $1.275 million in cash, and $9.2 million worth of assets. They also seized 5 properties and 14 vehicles. Nearly every Comanchero member in New Zealand faced charges, and the Christchurch chapter was completely dismantled. Despite these blows, the Comancheros continued to adapt and evolve. In Queensland, they began building something new. In September 2024, Queensland Police launched Operation Whiskey Rebound. Intelligence showed that current and former Comanchero members were recruiting for a newly formed street gang called the 50 Street Crew. Acting Detective Superintendent Craig Bowman explained, "We obtained intelligence that both current and former Comanchero members were actively recruiting for a new street gang known as the 50 Street Crew. This operation disrupted those efforts early and effectively curtailed the group's involvement in drug trafficking across the southeast." On February 6th and 7th, 2025, detectives executed 12 simultaneous search warrants across Brisbane, Caboolture, Rockhampton, and Maryborough. 40 police officers coordinated the raids. The results were significant. Police seized 2 revolvers, large amounts of ammunition, a grow house with 19 cannabis plants, quantities of cocaine, methamphetamine, and cannabis, and approximately $20,000 in cash. At one suspected safe house, officers found 1 kilogram of cocaine, 85 grams of methamphetamine, 2 kilograms of cannabis, a revolver, and another grow house. 15 people were charged with 54 offenses, including 3 men accused of recruiting others into a criminal organization. The Comancheros were diversifying, shifting away from traditional motorcycle club structures and creating street-level crews that could operate more flexibly and discreetly.
Just months earlier, in November 2024, National Task Force Morpheus carried out a nationwide operation targeting Comanchero chapters across Australia. 33 people were arrested, and police seized multiple firearms, large amounts of cash and jewelry, methamphetamine, cocaine, and illicit tobacco and vapes, worth over $1.5 million. The pattern was clear. The Comancheros had become one of Australia's most sophisticated criminal organizations. What began as a single motorcycle club founded by a Scottish ex-soldier had evolved into a transnational crime network spanning Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asia, and Turkey. They had survived leadership assassinations, police crackdowns, internal power struggles, and mass deportations. When authorities dismantled one structure, they built another. When motorcycle clubs came under too much scrutiny, they created street crews instead. The 50 Street Crew represented the Comanchero's newest evolution, a hybrid model combining the experience of outlaw motorcycle gangs with the agility and anonymity of street-level operations. Younger members, lower profiles, decentralized networks. Detective Superintendent Jason Kelly, chair of National Task Force Morpheus, summarized the ongoing threat. Outlaw motorcycle gangs are highly resilient and continue to recruit, using the false promise of brotherhood and a lucrative lifestyle. We will continue to use innovative policing strategies to dismantle their organizations and disrupt their activities, from their beginnings inspired by a John Wayne film to the Father's Day Massacre of 1984. From airport brawls to international drug trafficking, the Comancheros have evolved from a paramilitary-style motorcycle club into a global criminal enterprise. They traffic millions in narcotics, launder money, recruit aggressively, and operate safe houses across borders. Each time law enforcement strikes, the organization adapts. The 50 Street Crew may have been disrupted, but the Comancheros remain, evolving, rebuilding, and staying one step ahead. The question is no longer if they will form another network, but when and where.